Picture this. You're sitting in a cold, gray interrogation room. Fluorescent lights buzzing like angry bees. Three detectives across the table, staring at you like you're a bug under glass. They've been at it for 5 hours. Your coffee is cold, your hands are shaking. The lead detective leans in. "We know you were at the warehouse. We have the footage. So I'll ask you one more time. Why did you do it?" You take a breath. You've rehearsed the lie 100 times in your head. "I didn't do it. I was at home. Ask my girlfriend." You open your mouth to say it, and nothing comes out. Your throat locks up, like someone put a padlock on your vocal cords. You try again, a weird croak. Then, without your permission, words force themselves out, raw, unfiltered, true. "I did it because I was bored." The detectives sit back. Nobody blinks, because in this world, that's how it works. You can't lie. Not even a little. Here's the science real quick. About 50 years ago, a tiny bundle of neurons evolved in the human brain. Scientists call it the Veritas node. It sits right behind your forehead. And here's what it does. The moment you try to speak a lie, it shuts down your vocal cords, just stops them. You feel a little pop in your throat, like when you swallow wrong, and the lie dies before it leaves your mouth. The only way to speak is to tell the truth. Not your version, not a half-truth, the actual, verifiable, objective truth as your brain knows it. Think of it like a filter. Your brain thinks the lie. The filter says, nope. Your mouth stays shut. Your brain thinks the truth. The filter says, go ahead. And out it comes. Overnight, every single human became a walking lie detector, including you. In the world, it didn't just change, it exploded. Let me walk you through day one, because it was pure chaos. At 8 a.m., a customer service agent picks up the phone. She's tired. She hasn't had her coffee. The caller has been on hold for 20 minutes. She answers and says, automatically, honestly, "I'm just putting you on hold so I can finish my coffee and scroll through Instagram." The caller laughs, then realizes she's not joking. At 8:15, a husband walks into the kitchen. His wife asks, "Does this dress make me look fat?" He opens his mouth. His brain screams, "Say no." His vocal cords lock. He coughs. Then, "Yes, but I think it's the bread you've been eating, not the dress." She throws a spoon at him. He can't even apologize properly because "I'm sorry" only works if he actually means it. And right now, he doesn't. At 9 a.m., a preschool teacher asks a 5-year-old, "Did you eat the crayon?" The kid looks her dead in the eye and says, "Yes, and I do it again because it tasted like blueberry." No filter, no fear, just truth. Now zoom out, because the chaos wasn't just in kitchens and classrooms. Within 24 hours, every news channel ran the same kind of headlines. Stock market crashes as CEOs admit company value is inflated. President accidentally reveals military secrets during press conference. Marriage counselor quits after both clients admit they settled. Influencer goes live, says, "I actually hate this product. I just get paid." The world went from polite fiction to raw truth in less than a day, and nobody was ready. I remember watching a video of a car salesman. A customer walks in, points at a sedan, asks, "Is this a good car?" The salesman opens his mouth. He wants to say, "Yes, reliable, great gas mileage." Instead, his throat locks. Then, "No, it's a status symbol that costs more than your house, but I need the commission, so please buy it." The customer bought it anyway, because at least he knew the truth.
Now let's talk about the really scary stuff. Government, war, courts. How do you run a spy agency when every agent blurts out the truth under pressure? How do you have secret operations when even a whisper of a lie locks your throat? I'll tell you what happened. Within a week, every intelligence agency collapsed. Spies couldn't lie about their covers. Double agents were outed instantly. One CIA officer tried to say, "I'm just a tourist," at a checkpoint. His throat locked. He stood there, mouth opening and closing like a fish, until he finally said, "I'm here to steal missile codes." He did not get promoted. And courtrooms? Oh, they became a circus. Because a guilty person cannot say, "not guilty." Their vocal cords just refuse. So judges stopped asking for a plea. They just looked at the defendant. If the person opened their mouth and nothing came out, guilty. If they said, "guilty," also guilty. There was no way out. Some lawyers tried to argue that the Veritas node violated the right to remain silent, But here's the catch. You can remain silent. You just can't lie. The Constitution didn't protect lies. So the courts shrugged and said, stop committing crimes. But here's where it gets interesting. A new group emerged. They called themselves the Silent Ones. These are people who decided to stop speaking entirely, not because they're shy, because the truth is too dangerous. A mob boss who can't lie? He'd incriminate himself in 5 minutes. A politician who can't spin the truth? She'd lose every election. So they chose silence. They communicate with notes, with text messages, with hand signals. They live in quiet communities. Some wear badges that say, I'm not rude, I'm just protecting myself. And here's the thing. Nobody knows if they're good or bad, because they never speak. That mystery? It's terrifying. You walk past a silent one on the street, and you have no idea if they're a saint or a killer. They're a blank page. It added a whole new layer of fear to the world. Not lies, silence. Okay, let's lighten up for a minute, because the advertising industry got absolutely wrecked. And honestly, it was hilarious. Billboards used to say things like, the most refreshing drink on earth. Now they say, it's sugar water with a hint of lime. You don't need it. Fast food signs. Our burgers are fine. Not great, but you're hungry and we're open. A luxury watch ad. This costs $15,000 because rich people need to feel special. It tells the same time as a $20 Casio. And the best one I saw? A dating app billboard. Most people here are looking for validation or a rebound, but we have free pizza on Fridays. People loved it because for the first time, ads weren't lying. You could trust them. Well, trust them as much as you trust a company that admits its pizza is free because it's leftovers. Then the tech bros stepped in. Because of course they did. Within months, a whole new industry appeared. Honesty tech. One startup created an app called Filter. It was a little earpiece that listened to everything you were about to say, and if it detected a lie, it played a loud beep. So you'd be mid-sentence, hear beep, and know you had to rephrase. It was like autocorrect for morality. Another company built silence rooms. These were soundproof booths where you could go to scream, cry, or say things you didn't mean without anyone hearing. Because even though you couldn't lie, you could still think lies. And sometimes you just needed to get them out. And the most successful product? The Honesty Journal, a voice-locked app that let you record your thoughts, but it would only save them if they were true. People used it like therapy. You'd speak into it, and the app would say, that's false. Try again. After 10 tries, you'd finally admit, I'm not angry at my friend, I'm jealous of her, and the app would save it. It was weird. It was invasive, but it worked. After the chaos, after the collapse, after the ads and the apps and the silent ones, something beautiful happened. People started to actually trust each other. Think about it. Before the honesty lock, you never really knew if someone meant it when they said, I love you. They could be lying. They could be staying out of guilt. You just hoped. Now, if someone says, I love you, their vocal cords let it through, which means it's true. Not true for now, true in that moment, as far as their brain knows. That changed everything. Couples who survived the first month didn't have petty fights anymore, because you couldn't say, you never help with dishes, if they helped yesterday. Your throat would lock. So you had to say, you helped yesterday, but today you didn't, and I'm tired. And that's a real conversation. Friendships became deeper. Colleagues actually collaborated. Even strangers on the street. You could ask, is this neighborhood safe? And get an honest answer. No, don't walk alone here after 10 p.m. Saved your life. But here's the hardest test. Imagine you're a doctor. You have a patient with a terminal illness. The patient asks, am I going to die? Before the honesty lock, you'd say, we're doing everything we can. A gentle lie. Now, your throat locks. You can't say that. You have to say, yes, probably within 3 months, but we can make you comfortable. That's brutal. That's heartbreaking. But here's the thing. The patient thanks you because now they can say goodbye. They can plan. They can live their last days without false hope. That's the trade-off. The truth saves you from wasting time, but it also forces you to face things you'd rather hide from. So here's what I keep turning over in my head. Were the little white lies actually the glue of humanity? Or were we just living in a fake world? Think about it. No, your haircut looks great. I'm fine, really. Of course I remember your birthday. Those little lies smoothed everything over. They made life comfortable, but they also made it fake. Without them, we got chaos. But after chaos, we got something real, something raw, something that didn't need to be decoded or guessed at. I'm not saying the honesty lock is paradise. It's not. It's painful. It's awkward. It's the reason customer service agents quit in droves and why divorce rates spiked before they plummeted. But it's also the reason that when someone says, "I've got your back," you don't have to wonder. So I'll ask you the same question I've been asking myself. If you woke up tomorrow and you could not lie, not even a tiny one, what's the first truth that would force its way out of your mouth? And more importantly, who would you say it to? Because that truth, the one you're already thinking about, that's the one you've been hiding from yourself. Maybe it's time to let it out, even without a biological lock. Thanks for watching. And thanks for listening to The Truth.
You are running. Not the kind of running you do when you are late for something. Not the kind of running that ends when you slow down and catch your breath. The kind of running that ends when they catch you. Your lungs are burning. Your shoes are soaked through from the rain that has been falling on this city for 3 days straight. You do not know what day it is anymore. You stopped keeping track somewhere between the motel in the industrial district where you slept under the bed because the door lock was broken, and the parking garage where you spent 6 hours completely still in the back of an abandoned car while 2 men in plain clothes walked the levels above you with flashlights. They are not police. Police have uniforms and rules. These people have neither. You press yourself against the wall of a narrow alley between 2 warehouses, your back flat against the wet brick. You're breathing. You are trying to control your breathing because the rain is loud but not loud enough. If they are close enough to see you, they are close enough to hear you. Your left hand is bleeding. You do not remember when that happened. You look at it in the dark, the cut across the palm, the blood dark in the alley light. You close your hand. You focus. The bleeding slows. That is the thing about what you are. The thing that started all of this. The thing that made you worth finding. Worth hunting, worth the resources of an organization that does not officially exist, spending 18 months of documented effort trying to put you in a room you cannot leave. You can do things. You have always been able to do things. Above the alley, the rain keeps falling. Somewhere 2 streets over, you can hear the sound of vehicles moving slowly, not driving through, searching. You close your eyes. You think about your parents, what they looked like the last time you saw them, the specific way your mother held her hands when she was afraid, your father's voice on the phone 6 weeks ago before they took the phones, saying your name the way a person says a name when they are not sure they will get to say it again. You think about what you are going to do about that. The vehicles get closer. You pull the energy from the air around you, the thing you have been doing since before you had a word for it, and you press it outward, a field of stillness, a pocket of nothing that wraps around you and tells the instruments in those vehicles that there is nothing here worth stopping for. The vehicles slow, pass, keep going. You open your eyes. The alley is empty. The rain falls. You slide down the wall until you are sitting on the wet ground with your bleeding hand against your chest, and the cold of the brick soaking through your coat. You have been running for 43 days. And this, all of this, every hour of it, every wet alley and borrowed car and near miss and sleepless night in a place that does not know your name. This all started with something so small that you almost did not notice it happening. Level 1. The kid who saw too much. You were 5 years old the first time you saw it. Not a ghost, not a monster. Nothing that had a name in any story your parents read to you at night. You were sitting in the backyard on a Tuesday afternoon in early autumn, the grass still warm from summer, and you saw the light, not sunlight, not a reflection, something underneath the visible world. A luminous layer that sat behind every surface and every person and every object like a second skin. A soft shifting radiance that moved when the wind moved and breathed when living things breathed and went still when things were still. You did not know what it was. You were 5. You thought everyone could see it. You asked your mother that evening, pointing at the warm glow that surrounded her hands while she was cooking, what that was called. She looked at her hands, looked at you, said she did not see anything. You dropped it. Children learn very quickly which of their perceptions to keep private, but you kept watching. By 6, you had understood that the light, the layer, was not the same everywhere. It was stronger near living things, stronger near water and soil and open sky, weaker in concrete spaces, almost absent in hospitals, which you found interesting and disturbing in a way you could not yet articulate. It moved differently around different people. Some people had a steady warm current around them. A boy in your class who was very quiet and never spoke had almost none at all around him, just a faint cold thread. You stayed away from him without knowing why. By 7, you discovered you could touch it. Not physically, but with something. With a part of your attention that was not your eyes or your hands, but operated with the same intentionality. You could reach into the layer with this attention and feel it respond. like pressing a finger into still water and watching the surface move. You practiced in secret, in your bedroom at night with the door closed. Small things, moving the layer in a spiral, compressing it into a point, letting it expand. By 8, you had moved a glass of water 6 inches across a table without touching it. You told no one. By 9, you had discovered that the layer had a texture that corresponded to physical states. Heat and cold had distinct signatures. Emotion had signatures. Pain had a signature that was sharp and high and distinctly different from ordinary sensation. By 10, you could read a room by the layer alone. Walk into your parents' kitchen and know before anyone said a word whether they had been arguing. Know by the specific disturbed quality of the layer around a person whether they were sick. You did not yet have a word for any of it. You would learn later that the closest word was mana, the foundational energy that underlies physical reality. You were the exception. Make certain kinds of people very uncomfortable. And exceptions, you would learn much later, present in everything, accessible to almost no one. Level 2. The student of something with no name. Middle school happened and the layer got louder, not louder, more complex, more layered, which was the word you had been using in your head for it all along. Puberty does something interesting to a person who can manipulate foundational energy. The capacity expanded, not gradually, in sudden steps, like a staircase, each step arriving without warning. One morning you woke up and the layer was visible at 3 times the resolution it had been the night before. The detail in it, the fine structure of it, was suddenly accessible where before it had been a general impression. You were 13. It was a Tuesday, and you were sitting in a mathematics class, and the classroom, which had previously read to you as a flat, uninformative energy space, suddenly resolved into extraordinary detail. You could see the individual signatures of every student, the teacher's exhaustion, the particular agitation of a girl in the back row who was pretending to take notes, but put your head down and writing a letter to someone she was afraid of. After school, you went to the library, not for the books they had, for the internet connection. You had started searching for what you were, carefully, with the specific caution of someone who understands they are looking for something they should not be looking for, through systems that record everything. You used different terms every time. You never searched the same phrase twice. You cleared your history obsessively. What you found was not a manual. There was no manual. But there were fragments, across languages and traditions and centuries. Descriptions of people who perceived what you perceived, who could do what you could do. You were not the first. You were just the most recent in a very long and largely anonymous line. You taught yourself that is the only accurate word for it. There were no teachers, no mentors, no one to tell you that what you were doing was correct or incorrect. At 14, you learned containment, the ability to prevent the layer from affecting the physical world when you did not want it to. Before this, the layer sometimes reacted to your emotional states, objects moving slightly when you were upset, temperature dropping when you were afraid. Containment gave you control over the output, the ability to run the system silently. At 15, you learned directed application. You could take the energy of the layer and apply it to a specific physical problem, not unlimited. The energy cost was real and affected your body when you exceeded your capacity. Your first serious overreach put you in bed for 4 days with something that presented to your parents as a bad flu. At 16, you learned repair. This was the most significant discovery. The layer had a relationship to biological systems, to living tissue, that made it possible to accelerate certain natural processes, the healing of minor injuries, the resolution of early-stage infections. You tested it on yourself first with small cuts that healed in hours, then on your cat who had developed a persistent limp that disappeared over 3 days of careful intervention. At 17, you graduated secondary school with ordinary grades that concealed an education no institution had given you. You were quiet. You were private. You had good enough social functioning to avoid standing out. You went to university to study biology, because biology was the closest formal curriculum to what you were actually studying, and because you had started thinking about what to do with what you could do. Level 3, the one who helps. University was the first time you felt something approaching freedom, a new city, a campus where nobody knew you, a student population large enough that invisibility was easier than it had ever been. You studied, you worked. You had a small apartment with a problematic boiler and a view of a car park that you did not mind because the car park was where you practiced. And you started helping people, not dramatically, not with announcements, the kind of helping that leaves no trace and has no witness. You were 19 the first time, a woman on the street in front of your building. She had fallen, a bad fall, the kind that would have been a serious injury, and you caught the kinetic energy of the fall in the layer a fraction of a second before impact. She hit the ground, but it was nothing. She stood up surprised and dusted her hands and walked away, not understanding why she was not hurt. You stood at your apartment window and your hands were shaking. After that, you paid attention. You developed a practice of extending your awareness outward, keeping a quiet background perception of the layer in your immediate environment while going about your day. You became very good at it. The maintenance cost was low, like the background processing of a computer. It did not interfere with your functioning. You intervened 47 times in your first year of doing this. You counted. Each one a small, precise action. A redirected fall, a slowed vehicle, a fire contained before it could spread in a kitchen 2 floors above your apartment while the occupant was asleep. Each one invisible. Each one leaving the world slightly different from what it would have been. By 20, you were better at it than you had imagined you could be. The precision had improved to the point where you could intervene in events at significant distances, up to 100 meters with full reliability, further with reduced accuracy. The city you lived in had an unusual statistical anomaly in its emergency services data, a reduction in severe injury incidents in a specific residential area. A journalist wrote a small piece about it. Neighborhood watch groups took credit. You read the article and said nothing to anyone. On a Tuesday evening in your 21st year, you were walking home from the university library at 11 at night. A street over you felt, not heard, felt, the specific high signature of acute pain. You were there in 30 seconds. An alley behind a restaurant, 2 men, a third person on the ground. You did not think about it. You extended the layer and the 2 men's bodies experienced a sudden neurological interruption. Not damage, not lasting harm. They went down. You checked the person on the ground. A young woman, injuries that needed medical attention. You called the emergency services from a phone box 2 streets away and waited until you heard the sirens before you walked home. You did not sleep that night. Not from guilt, from something else. From the understanding of what you had just chosen to be. Because up until that alley, you had been someone who caught falling people. After that alley, you were someone who made standing people fall. The distinction felt important. Still feels important. By 22, you had saved 119 people by your own count. You kept records in an encrypted file on a laptop that never connected to the internet. Dates, incidents, outcomes. None of them knew you existed. That was how you wanted it. Level 4, the video. It was not even a dramatic incident. That is what you still cannot quite believe. Of all the interventions you had made, the burning building, the bridge where the cable had begun to fail, the Tuesday in the financial district when you prevented what would have been a catastrophic structural collapse in a parking garage by reinforcing the load-bearing column for 11 minutes until the evacuation was complete. Of all of those, it was not one of those. It was a woman slipping on ice outside a supermarket. She was 60, perhaps 65. She slipped on black ice at the entrance, and her trajectory was wrong, the edge of a concrete step directly in the path of her head. You were 10 meters away, and you acted without thinking because by then you had been acting without thinking for 4 years. You caught her, in the layer. A field of suspended kinetic energy around her body that slowed the fall and redirected the angle so she landed on her side on the flat pavement. Minor bruising. She was fine. She sat up, confused and grateful, and a small crowd gathered around her to help. You walked away. You did not see the phone. You never see the phones. 48 hours later, your intervention, a woman visibly caught in mid-fall by something invisible, her trajectory physically altered in a way that the video showed clearly, was on the internet. You found it on a Thursday. It had been posted on a Tuesday. 2.3 million views. The comments were, mostly, dismissive, edited, CGI, a trick. The algorithm had already suggested 5 video essays debunking it. You watched them and felt something close to relief. Let them debunk it. Let the internet argue itself into comfortable certainty that what it saw was not real. You closed the laptop, you went to sleep. 3 weeks later, you noticed the car. Same model, different plates every 3 days, but the same 2 men. Outside your building at 8 in the morning. Outside the university at 4 in the afternoon. Parked at the end of your street at 11 at night. You ran the plates the 3rd time they changed. The registration came back to a logistics company that did not have a website. The address was a mail forwarding service. You walked past the car slowly on a Tuesday morning and extended your perception into the layer around the vehicle. Electronic equipment, significant electronic equipment, recording devices. The men inside, their biological signatures reading as alert and trained, not police. The specific controlled baseline of people who do their jobs without civilian oversight. You went back to your apartment. You sat on the floor in the center of your living room. You understood several things simultaneously. They had watched the video. They had taken it seriously in a way the internet had not. They had found you, and they had been watching you long enough now that they had something they considered sufficient. You made tea because your hands needed something to do. Then you started thinking about what came next. Level 5, the hunt. They came to your door on a Wednesday morning, 2 of them, plain clothes. Polite in the way that people are polite when they do not need to be anything else. They showed credentials that were real enough, and from an agency whose name you recognized as one that officially did not have field operatives, they said they wanted to talk. They said it would be easier if you cooperated. They said the word voluntarily 3 times in 4 minutes, which told you everything about what the alternative was. You offered them tea. You listened. You asked questions. You were cooperative and pleasant and gave them nothing. When they left, you had 40 minutes before they came back with more people. You were not there when they came back. You had a bag packed. You had been ready for 6 months. The first week was manageable. You had money in cash. You had contacts from your intervention work. People who owed you help they did not understand. You moved between cities, between accommodations, keeping the layer pressed outward around you constantly. The second week, they blocked your bank accounts. By the third week, they had visited your parents. Your father called a number that was already disconnected. Your mother left a message on a phone you had already destroyed. You found out through a contact 2 weeks later what they had said to your parents during that visit, the specific language they had used, the implication, not stated, never stated, about what would happen to people associated with a person who remained at large. You sat in a borrowed room above a dry cleaning shop, and you felt something harden in your chest that has not softened since. The bounty appeared on Tuesday of the 5th week. Not a public bounty, not your face on a wanted poster. A quiet communication through the networks that connected a certain category of professional. A significant sum for information leading to your location. A different sum, larger, for physical delivery. You were a criminal, not because you had committed a crime, because you existed in a way that frightened people with resources. Week 6, they took your parents. Not arrested. Taken. Your parents who had done nothing except raise a child they did not fully understand. Taken to a location you spent 8 days trying to find through the layer. Extending your perception further than you had ever pushed it. Burning through energy reserves until you were sick and shaking. And you found them. A facility 200 kilometers away. Both alive. Both frightened. Both being used as a message. Surrender. Come in safely. And they go home. You thought about what comes after safe surrender. You thought about the room you would be put in, the experiments, the documentation, the long and thorough dismantling of everything you had spent 20 years learning to be. You did not surrender. You ran instead. For 43 days you have been running, and tonight you are sitting in a wet alley with a bleeding hand and the sound of their vehicles moving away from you in the rain. You flex your injured hand. Focus. The bleeding stops. You think about your parents, the facility, the 200 kilometers, the organization that took them. You think about what you can do. Not the small, careful interventions, not the caught falls and the redirected fires and the invisible rescues that kept your name out of everything. Something else. Something you have been capable of for years and have never used because you understood the cost. Because there are things in the layer that are not gentle and not precise and not invisible. Things that can reach across distance and apply force in ways that leave no trace but are not small. Things you have been afraid of using. You stand up. You look out of the alley at the empty, rain-soaked street. 43 days of running. Your parents in a facility 200 kilometers away. An organization that decided you were a resource before it decided you were a person. You flex your hand again. No bleeding, fully sealed. You are 25 years old. You have been running since you were 24. You are done running. You pull the layer inward, not outward, not a field, not a defense. You pull it inward and let it compress and let it charge and let it become something it has never been in all the years you have been practicing. Something with a direction, something with a target. You step out of the alley, the rain falls, and you begin to move, not away, toward.